Okay. So the question is about the starting of MET in Romania. And I can't really answer this question directly, as I was not responsible for starting MET in Romania. I came into this world a little later. So I'll tell you about why I happen to be here. I've always been interested, since I was a boy, in the Habsburg dynasty and the empire, in particular the later phases of it. And a chance meeting in England with Jessica Douglas-Hume, which came at the same time as we created a family foundation in Holland called Stichting Horizon, meant that we were able to talk about what was going on here and her ideas about the conservation of the villages in this area after the departure of so many Saxons to Germany. And it was that coincidence that, in fact, brought me here in the first place and gave me such a great interest in this extraordinary part of the world with its beautiful villages and landscape. And therefore I was, while not in any way responsible for the beginnings of MET or MET's work at that stage, I became very much involved afterwards, and we were luckily able to support MET, this is my foundation, in the various projects that they undertook. We were in our infancy as well, and we were looking for projects where we felt that cultural interests were at risk generally, and this seemed to be exactly the case in Transylvania. So it was relatively easy to put these two organizations together and for Horizon to begin its work with Mihai Eminescu Trust here. And we have been continuing for 25 years or so. And I think it's been a very successful partnership, although naturally Mihai Eminescu Trust has been able to extend its work and the range of its projects far wider than could only be supported by Horizon, which is a good thing. But we are still there and we are still helping. Well, possibly the success of our early initiatives, and it was not easy at the beginning. We made mistakes. We had to confront a long past where things did not work well, where attempts had been made to suppress the culture that had been Saxon. And in the absence of the inhabitants, it was therefore much harder to try and to recreate the atmosphere, the life, the village customs and habits, let alone restore all the buildings that were in very poor shape as a result of the neglect and ignorance that had prevailed for many, many years of misrule from Bucharest, and also that had been deserted to such a large degree by the Saxon population. So it was reversing a trend so big. It's like trying to push back a huge wave. It's not easy. And I think we have slowly, over the time, succeeded. And it's been necessary to remain conscious about what we're intending to do at the end goal, in order to keep going, because keeping going is the only possible way with this. This is, I think, largely been successful. But there's never a moment when you can say stop, because the works themselves are continuous. They need to create the wave in the other direction, which is what we have been doing. And I'm happy that, quite apart from anything else, I don't wish to stop coming to Transylvania. Well, of course, we have implemented a huge range of projects, all of which have an impact. Obviously, some smaller impact, some a larger impact. But the concept that is perhaps the most important, and I think this is the only answer to this question, is this idea of the whole village project, which was developed very early on as an idea. It is not a simple one either, and it's a very ambitious one, but it starts at a very small level, at a very low level, which is why I think it has worked so well. It starts at the level of the restoration of a house, even the painting of the facade of a house. And then it moves on to the idea that that house could become used in some way outside of its original use. That new use was obviously going to be tourism, so creating guest houses for tourists. That brings in a certain amount of money. It also requires, in the restoration phase, it requires workmen, it requires people making objects for the house, the locks, the windows, the doors, the furniture. It requires food for the people to eat, the guests to eat, wine for them to drink. This creates opportunities, business opportunities elsewhere in the village, and consequently that brings in more money. And then the money recirculates back into the economy, more tourist houses are created, more restoration work is done. And so you get this, this economic circle, which has been so important in the revitalizing of village life. And Viscri is an extremely, obviously a shining example, but it's taken hold elsewhere as well. We began, I think, in a very ambitious way, hoping we could roll this program out to the extent that we would encompass a great majority of the villages in Saxon Transylvania. Well, that is clearly impossible in the short term. In the longer term, who knows? But I think that we have made enough of an imprimatur of this idea to really gauge it as a great success. And it is the idea that has carried us forward, and we do a lot of other things. Mihai Eminescu Trust does big projects, small projects, some of which are not wholly connected to this whole village concept. But in certain ways, they feed into it and they make the kind of atmosphere in which it is easy to work on what we're doing. So that is the big impact. There are, of course, individual projects that have been very successful. And it's impossible to make a conversation like this without referring to the Citadel Almaviv, which is a standout conservation project, not only in Transylvania, but in European, indeed in world terms, because it has been so well done. Yeah. After immense difficulty, bureaucratic problems, finding the right kind of people to do the work, all that. But on its own, it stands as the shining example of what can be done when there is a will to do it and a team that's prepared to take on the immense amount of background paperwork and all the rest of it that goes with such projects. My wishes are that we continue, and that we continue large and small, that we don't necessarily go for projects that are hugely glamorous per se, just for the sake of doing them, that we continue our work at a low level and at a high level so that we remain constant to the original concepts that we had, ideas that we had, approach that we had, and which is very much all-inclusive. It's impossible to convince everybody in a given village that we're doing the right thing or in a given town, but it is important that we try and engage with as many people as possible. And that means taking a relatively humble view of what we are and what we do, because contact with people requires you to understand a little bit why they don't entirely believe in what you're doing, why they are not sympathetic. We have to find a way to make more and more people understand, be sympathetic, and look to us as a beneficial organization that can help them, can improve their lives. And that's an educational route. People have to learn the new ways, which are in fact new old ways again. And it has been amazing to me how often we have found the people that can do that without difficulty. So in some ways, you can say that a lot of these seeds are still, or have been in the ground, and then we are now encouraging them to grow out and turn into rather beautiful flowers, if I may put it that way. I would like to continue that. That is my wish. There is a huge amount more to do. There will always be more to do. It's always satisfying, indeed exciting. The only things that stand in our way are big people, Bucharest or elsewhere, who make a nuisance of themselves. But ultimately, in a small way, we keep going, and we have made a big change. So that's my wishes for the future. My hopes, perhaps, are that on the other side of the coin, that the rocks that are put in the way of our path are not so big, or that they are removed slowly, so that other people don't, through stupidity or malevolence, stop us doing what we should be doing. We have a task to do. It's hugely important, not just for the villages or Transylvania or Romania indeed, but on a much bigger scale, I think, because it shows what can be done with goodwill, perseverance, very hard work, and a degree of love for our occupation. So that is my hope for the future, and I hope that I will be also here for as long as possible. It may not be another 25 years, but for as long as I can. I would not be sitting here in this courtyard with these blue columns on either side of me in the first house, I think, that we restored and made into a guest house. So this is, if you like, where it all began. And so it's very good to be having this talk 25 years on in that place, because this is an important sign of the work that we've done and of our beginnings. And we are conscious, I think, of our past as much as we're conscious of our future.